thanks for being here. My talk is going to be mostly about the social and outreach efforts we have done through the CNPS Baja chapter and efforts done before. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of what we see. It's going to be the context, what happens in Mexico in terms of native plants, the main problem, the actions we have taken and the local solutions we're trying to achieve, and the results we have found so far. So with the talk that you've seen, by now you might have noticed that there is a really big lack of knowledge of native vegetation in the general public. Mexico's environmental education is very... Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So Mexico is not great in terms of environmental education, and especially in this area of northern Mexico, for some reason there are virtually any common names. In the rest of Mexico, people are more associated with the native vegetation, but for some reason, northwestern Baja are very disconnected to the native vegetation. So for me, one of the indicators is that there's a really big lack of common names. People don't know any of the plants out there, other than the curcus and the oaks. We have really complicated regulation protecting native plants, and this is complicating our promotion of having more native plant nurseries in Baja California. The way I see our situation is how California was here maybe in the 1930s or before, where the majority of the population didn't have any idea of what native plant was, and of course no idea that they could actually use it on a landscape or in a garden. The regulatory issues that we're facing is that it's easier to get a permit to clear land than to actually rescue or collect plants that were cleared by that project, for example, or collecting seeds or germplasm to grow native plants legally in a nursery. Also, although the environmental regulations are quite good, the fine for breaking the law is much cheaper than actually doing things right. So there's no
Incentive.
Thank you. No incentive for people to do things right. This is a very interesting case. We have 3 native plant nurseries in the state. All of them are tiny, and this is an interesting case. This couple from a rural community in Tijuana was supported by Semarnat, which is the agency that has to give the permits for legally collecting germplasm. This couple got some funding from Semarnat, but they're not doing it legally. Not even Semarnat is able to do their own projects in a legal way. So we can buy plants, but they're not, according to the law. So the problem is that as long as people don't know the plants, they don't see any perceived value in them. If you don't know anything, you obviously will not value it. And this is generating a really big problem, which is what we're facing right now. It's when people acquire land in Mexico, first thing they do is pay for the land and then make a fence and clear everything. The word we use in Mexico is clean, it's not clear. And the result is, of course, a lot of landscape and biodiversity loss. This is an example that happened a few months ago. The people there bought the land, and as soon as they got it, they just cleared everything. They just built a house, but there's not an intended use of agriculture or any more building. It's just a way of claiming property. There's a lot of signs like this around the valley, Guadalupe Valley, and I just called them, and to rent one of these huge things, it's just $27 an hour.
Wow.
So if you don't have a lot of rules, or you can skip them, and you can rent machinery like this for less than $30 an hour, the problem that we're facing is kind of dire. What we're seeing is, as I mentioned, people buy the land, they put a fence, and it's a way of claiming ownership. It's a way of saying, this is my land. And because they're not trees, we know that just the word shrub, the shrublands are not really valued in our minds, in our society. So they're not seeing this clearing the land as deforestation. However, when you put deforestation in Wikipedia, you see this in Brazil. It's trees, so we think that we really accept that is deforestation. And this is an example in Guadalupe Valley, and the example is the same. So we're trying to communicate this message to the general public. If you remember, I showed you the picture of the idealized garden, but as we know, the moment you clear the land and you get rid of all the mycorrhizae, it's very hard for plants to grow. So they start planting geraniums and other exotics, and they really don't do good. I'm going to focus a little bit more now on Guadalupe Valley. I'm sure some of you may have heard of it. It is known as Mexico's Napa Valley, or Napa Valley in the 40s or 50s, which is great. The tourism has been growing, the economy has been moving, even with all the negative promotions that we've had in Mexico, people are still going. However, this is equaling a very huge growth at a very high pace. I don't have strong statistics, but in 2001 there were 10 wineries, and there are over 100 registered wineries. There are many little projects, so it's growing at a fast pace. It is a valley that's highly dependent not only on the grapes and the quality of their wines, but on landscape as well. There's many beautiful touristic projects, and of course it's growing in terms of how many acres are being planted for grapes, and an urban sprawl has also started to happen. So because of lack of regulation and lack of knowledge, well, not lack of regulation, lack of following the regulation, and lack of knowledge, we're seeing landscape loss. And as you can notice in this picture, the place is still quite pristine. The landscape and the vegetation cover is quite good so far. But if we pay attention to the cases where there is actually development already, we'll notice that it's always the same. People buy the land, they clear the vegetation. So what are we doing about this? My philosophy is, because the regulations in Mexico don't seem to be working as good as we would like to see them, is Paula Pijoan, the Senegalese activist, in which he says, in the end, we will only conserve what we love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we have been taught. So my hope is that if people actually get to know the beauty of the plants, and in the last presentation was a beautiful example, most people don't see them, but once they see them, they actually do start really loving them and caring about them. So a personal tactic has helped make them fall in love. And it's been working. As Cesar was saying in the morning, people are answering in really high numbers, really unexpected. We weren't expecting this high interest from people. So on our first official CNPS Baja chapter field trip, we got over 8 people showing up. And we promoted it in about a week, just through Facebook and emails, and people just showed up. We don't know how people are getting to know this information, but people really want to know more about it. So we've been creating more field trips since then, always with really good numbers. And I love seeing that it's a lot of young people, kids, young people, families, and just like we heard yesterday in the talk, we need to promote kids to go out more. And you can see people smelling the plants, tasting them, touching them. They're really interacting with the native ecosystem. They're really getting into it. This is a workshop that I developed 2 years ago or 3 years ago, in which, because I fell in love with native plants in 2008. There's no native plant nurseries in Mexico, and I wanted to build my own garden, so I couldn't, and it's illegal to bring them from the States to Baja. We always do it on the trunk and pray that no one will stop us. But it's not the easiest way. So what I started doing was going out into the wild, collecting seeds and growing my own plants. It was all practicing and trial and error, many errors. But through that, I learned a little bit of the basics. And so I've always been promoting to people the use of native plants and landscapes. But it's really hard to promote them when people can't buy them. So I started giving tiny workshops where I would show people the value of native plants, how to use them, and how to grow them. So people would actually give the workshop with some native plants growing, if they were good. And some people have sent me pictures, and they've actually grown so far. So I show them what works and what doesn't work. Many people have taken the course so far. Different organizations have jumped in and they've shown interest. So I've sent around 300 people have taken this course. And because many people are so disconnected to nature, they start working, getting their hands dirty and everything. And they get really excited. As I said, we use social media to get our word around. And we've also conducted many talks, and as well, always really high numbers of people showing up. This is a campaign that we've developed, and you can see there's brochures on the back as well if you want to take one. But this is a very simple brochure where we're showing people, if you're going to buy land, and if you're going to clear land, think twice about it. So we're giving them reasons why they should think twice about it. There's a really high drought in Ensenada right now. We have water caps every single day for the last 10 months. So people are like starting to learn how to live without water. It's been amazing. It's out of this world, but because of that, people are actually listening to our message. And so when we say native vegetation allows for water to be filtered, then now they listen. If there's less erosion, less dust, women don't want to be sweeping their houses all the time, so if you leave the vegetation covered, there's going to be less dust around, and they like that message as well. We're telling them that if they buy land that actually has good native vegetation cover, they have a free native plant garden. And when we mention how much money Californians are spending in creating native gardens, they get really excited. Because the garden is just there. So we propose clearing the land only where they want to construct or agriculture is planned. In agriculture, we propose to leave native vegetation patches because it helps with pest control, attracts pollinators, and improves soil quality, and to make use of native vegetation as natural gardens, as I said. So the result so far is that people are starting to get more engaged. There's native plants in street art lately. You can see Cachalawa, Poppy, Dahlia. Architects are also starting to get interested in not destroying the landscape. It's what the Valle de Guadalupe is selling. The landscape is one of the main assets. And so they're finally understanding that to destroy it is not a really good idea. So we're seeing more and more cases of architects not destroying what the land is offering. I love this example because this couple had just bought land and they knew a little bit about native plants, but not that much. And they had a big land and they felt like they had to clear it and start a garden from scratch. And when they heard that they didn't, they just got so happy. They knew how much money they had just saved. And so they did things like just creating little pathways. And this is another example that I love. Laurel sumac, Melos malarium. For some reason, it's one of the plants that people hate the most because as soon as you put the machete out, it starts growing again. It's very resilient, but people associate it with the wildland and they don't want it in their house. It's a beautiful plant, as you know, it attracts quails and it needs no water at all. But people are seeing more and more that it's a great little tree or little shrub to have in the house with no care or tending needed. This is another example where I've been talking to the neighbors and they are noticing that the acacia that you can see on the left, with a lot of water and tending, is nowhere near as beautiful as the laurel sumac that they actually gave shape as a tree. So this was one house and the neighbors actually copied what they were doing. And I don't know if you can notice, but they put like little Christmas lights around the trunk. And they're really happy with their laurel sumacs. Another example of success that you want to see, we spoke to the delegate of one of the municipalities or the counties in Baja Guadalupe. We told him about the valley, and he decided to stop clearing the highway median strip because the seed bank there is great. So it doesn't matter how many times they chop the plants up, they always come back. So in the left picture, you can see Baccharis nautroides, and Eriogonum fasciculatum, and some Artemisia californica. So the idea is that the plants are resilient. Plants are just coming back even with all the abuse that we're offering. So if they just stop the abuse, native plants will recover, at least in Baja California, because the damage has been recent. Future ideas that we have is we would definitely like to spread this message in a broader scale. So having billboards in Guadalupe Valley where people are just arriving, we know we need to spread the information to key actors. We would love to do more work in schools and with the general public and involving with local counties and so much more. So that's it. Thank you for being here. And I would love to thank the CNPS for all the support offered to the Baja chapter for us coming here. Thank you.